6 actors that Orson Welles really didn't like. It was born Orson Welles, born on May 6, 1915, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. George Orson Welles is still one of the most mysterious and important people in the history of art and entertainment in the 20th century. His early life was shaped by both good fortune and bad luck. Ives Welles was his father and a wealthy businessman and engineer. Ives Welles was his mother and a talented pianist who encouraged her son's love of the arts. But Welles' life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. His parents split up when he was young, and his mother died when he was 9 years old. His father then died not long after. Welles had no parents by the time he was in his mid-teens. He had to learn to be independent at an unusually young age because of these events. They gave him a strong sense of freedom and a desire to be in charge of his own life. Since he was very young, Welles had amazing creative and imaginative skills. He was very good at painting, drawing, and telling stories. His teachers noticed how good he was at acting, how commanding he was, and how well he could imitate sounds and become different characters. Welles started dabbling with theater at the prestigious Todd School for Boys in Woodstock, Illinois. He directed ambitious shows that showed signs of his later genius. Roger Hill, the director of the school, saw how talented he was and gave him chances to put on plays that were on par with professional productions. While he was still a youngster, Welles was already known as someone who would change the arts in big ways. People first became aware of Welles through his work in theater and radio, where he combined classical practices with new ideas. In the 1930s, he and John Houseman opened the Mercury Theater in New York City. With new takes on Shakespearean plays and modern works, the Mercury Theater became a brave and creative company that pushed people to think. Critics were shocked and pleased by their works, like Welles' famous version of Macbeth that was set in Haiti and was influenced by voodoo. After reading H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds on the radio on October 30th, 1938, Welles became famous all over the world. Listeners were scared because they thought Earth was being attacked by Martians because the broadcast was presented as a series of current events reports. This event made Welles known as a brave, controversial, and clever storyteller for life. Orson Welles jumped into Hollywood when he was only 25 years old with one of the strangest contracts in the history of films. RKO Pictures gave him full artistic control over all of his projects, which has never been done before by a young director with no experience. The result was 1941's Citizen Kane, a movie that changed the way films were made. Welles directed, co-wrote, produced, and starred in the movie. He used cutting-edge techniques like deep focus cinematography, non-linear storytelling, overlapping speech, and daring camera angles to make it a groundbreaking masterpiece. Citizen Kane didn't do well at the box office at first, but critics saw how great it was, and over time, it became thought of as possibly the best movie ever. Charles Foster Kane, the movie's main character, was partly based on newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst. He stood for ambition, power, and the emptiness that can lie beneath success, a theme that has stuck with people for generations. Even though Citizen Kane was a great movie, Welles' work in Hollywood was full of problems and frustrations. Studios often thought he was too bold, too different, and unwilling to give in. His next projects, like 1942's The Magnificent Ambersons, had problems with interference from the studios, which cut or changed a lot of his work without his permission. Over the years, Welles became famous for both the great works he created and the many unfinished or lost projects. He was always fighting with the Hollywood system, which made him known as a rebellious mind who had a hard time with the demands of business. Still, Welles's drive to be artistic never went away. Across many countries, he continued to direct, act, and write. That's where he felt more free to make films like Othello, 1951, Touch of Evil, 1958, and Chimes at Midnight, 1965. Each of these films showed his big artistic vision, his love for Shakespeare, and his skill at making films with small budgets that were like poetry on the big screen. As an actor, Welles brought his deep, resonant voice and strong presence to dozens of films, starting with The Third Man, 1949, where he played the mysterious Harry Lime in a part that became famous. He then went on to play roles in both mainstream and independent films. Orson Welles got married for the first time on November 14, 1934. He was only 19 years old, and the bride was an aspiring actor from Chicago named Virginia Nicholson. Welles got married when he was just starting out in his career. He was full of youthful desire and creativity, but he wasn't yet the huge star in films and plays that he would become. While Nicholson was interested in the arts and theater herself, she was pulled to Welles' charm, intelligence, and boundless energy. Welles saw the couple's marriage as both a personal commitment and the start of a family at a time when his name was still being built in the theater and radio industries. In 1938, 4 years later, they had their only child, a girl named Christopher Welles Fadar. She would go on to become an author and a well-known expert on how to teach kids. Christopher's childhood was surrounded by her father's rising fame, including the huge success of his Mercury Theater on the air shows. As she grew up, she was both influenced by and separated from the huge shadow that his fame left. Unfortunately, Welles' marriage to Virginia Nicholson started to fall apart as his personal and business lives got more complicated. By the late 1930s, Welles was having an affair with the beautiful Mexican actress Dolores Del Rio. Del Rio was already a big star in Hollywood and one of the first Latin American actors to become famous around the world. Their love was strong and emotional, but it caused problems in his first marriage. When Virginia found out that Welles was seeing Dolores behind her back, the hurt was too much to bear. The couple got a divorce in February 1940, which was the official end of their marriage. It was right before Welles was about to make Citizen Kane, his cinematic masterpiece that would make him famous as one of the best directors of all time. Even though Welles and Dolores Del Rio loved each other and worked well together as artists, their relationship did not last forever. The affair went on for a long time, but by 1943, it was over. Around this time, Welles started dating Rita Hayworth, who was another famous star from the golden age of Hollywood. Hayworth, who was called the Love Goddess because of how beautiful she was and how captivating she was on screen, had a special effect on Welles. Their relationship grew quickly, and by September 1943, they were married in what was thought to be one of Hollywood's most beautiful weddings. People and the media paid a lot of attention to the marriage, making Welles and Hayworth one of the most talked-about pairs of the time. Being at the height of their fame, they had a girl in December 1944. Her name is Rebecca Welles Manning, and she was born into a family. Welles really liked Rita and often talked about her with love and respect. But the stress of Hollywood, their different jobs, and Welles's restless personality made the marriage difficult. Even though he really cared about her, the marriage failed, and in 1947, they got a divorce. Their daughter, Rebecca, would later choose a quieter life away from the bright lights of Hollywood and make her own way as a writer. Welles had a lot of relationships after his second marriage ended, both personal and business. It wasn't until 1955 that he got married for the third and final time. In that year, he married Paola Mori, an Italian actress who was known for her beauty and skill in European movies. They had their daughter Beatrice Welles in November 1955, later that same year. She would later become the guardian of her father's memory and play a key role in protecting and managing his film estate. Welles was with Paola for the rest of his life, unlike the weddings he had before. From 1955 until he died in 1985, they were officially married. During those 30 years, they had both good and bad times. On the other hand, Orson Welles' personal life was always very complicated. In 1966, he started a long-term relationship with Oja Kodar, an actress and artist from Croatia who became both his partner in love and an artistic partner. Welles got ideas from Oja and worked closely with him on many of his later unfinished film projects, such as The Other Side of the Wind. They were deeply in love and stayed together for almost 20 years. Welles never divorced Paola Mori, but Oja Kodar was with him for most of his last years. This unusual arrangement showed how Welles often took an unusual approach to love, life, and art. Not only was Orson Welles a great director and actor, but he was also known for having a sharp tongue and standing up for what he believed in. Welles was one of the most vocal men in Hollywood. He wouldn't hide his dislike for people he thought were overrated, unprofessional, or just awful to work with. Not only was he very charming and funny, but he also had a deep-seated dislike for some stars, whom he saw as fakes or bothersome in the movie business. The following list includes 7 stars that Orson Welles was known to hate very much, along with the hurtful things he said about them. 1. Robert Mitchum Touch of Evil, which came out in 1958 and stars Charlton Heston, is still one of Welles's best works. Even though the movie got good reviews later on, Welles didn't like Heston very much because he thought he was stiff and lacked range. Welles once said that Heston was like a hard piece of wood. He wasn't a star, but the company thought he was. When they worked together, there was a lot of stress because Heston tried to use his power in places where Welles thought he shouldn't have been. Welles saw Heston as an example of the wooden Hollywood star system he didn't like. 2. Humphrey Bogart. People thought Bogart was one of the toughest main men in Hollywood, but Welles couldn't stand him. Many people, including Welles, thought that Bogart's acting was fake and forced, not natural. He once said that Bogart was always pretending to be tough, but never really was. Behind the show, you could see the sweat. Welles didn't like it when actors worked hard to create a certain image instead of letting themselves be who they were in a part. To him, Bogart was more like a character from Hollywood films than a real actor. 3. Joseph Cotten. Cotten was one of Welles' best friends and work partners at the Mercury Theater, so this may come as a surprise to many. But their relationship got worse as time went on. Welles became angry at Cotten because he didn't stay loyal to Welles' projects and instead went after his own job in Hollywood. Joe was a close friend, but when the studios called, he left me. When success was at stake, loyalty didn't matter much to him. Even though they got along a little better before Welles died, Welles's words about Cotten's decisions were still bitter. 4. John Laurence Olivier. Welles admired Olivier's technical skill, but he didn't like his ego or what he saw as Olivier's fixation on beauty over telling the truth. Olivier had a lot of skill, but no heart. He was good at playing kings, but not men. Welles thought that acting was about being honestly human and bare, while Olivier's stiff style seemed fake to him. In the world of Shakespearean acting, the two men were rivals, and Welles never forgave Olivier for being praised as the best actor who could play the bard. John Houseman, number 5. Even though Houseman isn't known for being a performer, he worked closely with Welles in the early days of Mercury Theater. Their relationship ended in anger, and Welles held on to that anger for many years. As Houseman went on to act in films like The Paper Chase, Welles laughed at the idea that anyone would take him seriously as an actor. Houseman was a worker who pretended to be an artist. The writing he did was always better than the work he did. The fight between them became famous, and Welles made sure that everyone knew how much he disliked Houseman. 6. The actor Richard Burton. Burton's larger-than-life personality and work as a Shakespearean actor might have made him a good match for Welles, but their personalities and ideas were very different. Welles thought Burton's acts were selfish and bad because he was known for drinking too much. Burton yelled his lines and believed that volume showed how he felt. He thought Welles was great because he was too much, even though Welles liked big showy moves. Still, felt Burton lacked control and honesty, which turned Shakespeare into melodrama. 7th. Joan Fontaine. Welles was mad at Joan Fontaine because they worked together on Jane Eyre in 1943. He thought she was cold, tough, and didn't care about what he said. Fontaine was like an iceberg that never got warm. It was like reading lines to a statue when you were acting with her. On set, you could feel the tension between them, and Welles never forgiven her for what he saw as her lack of kindness as an actress. He thought she took the life out of scenes and didn't like how Hollywood diva she was. Orson Welles had a lot of harsh ideas, but they also showed a lot about how he thought about art. He believed that acting should be honest, take risks, and show real humanity. He didn't like ego, trickery, or betrayal. His harsh criticisms, which some might think were unfair, show the fierce character of a man who loved his work and wouldn't give in. Welles thought that being very angry was another way to show how much he cared about making films. Welles passed away on October 10, 1985, from a heart attack. He had made his last interview for the syndicated TV show The Merv Griffin Show the day before. He worked until early the next morning after getting home, typing up stage directions for a shoot the next day. He was found dead early in the morning by his driver. His will said that his body should be cremated, and a short, private burial was held.